Welcome to Meaningful Interviews. I'm Dalfin, Rabbi Dalfin. I'm here today with a great Chabad scholar, a Ben Torah, a real Ben Torah, someone who has put his time and effort into understanding the Torah on the highest level, and it's an honor to be here in Coral Springs, Florida. We both grew up in Brooklyn, and we know each other a long time. But Rabbi Keller, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Keller, has written over 20 books on many subjects, on many topics. And what I find most amazing, this is the truth, is that much, at least what I see and what I relate to, is things that most other people don't know. You know, there are regular Rosh Yeshiva, there are regular mashpiyim, teachers, but there are not many people who know, Divrei Yisrael, Jewish history, dabble in Kabbalah, in Chassidus, and within these subjects that you bring to the table a different angle, a very interesting angle. So that's why I'm very interested in this interview. So I want to begin, Rabbi Keller, with asking you the following. I know that you have done a lot of research on the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe Shneur Zalman's life, and in particular his discourses, his Maimorim, that he said for many years. And I believe that most Lubavitchers, most Chabadniks have no clue about this. You learn Likutei Torah and Torah Oir, you dabble a little bit here, a little bit there, Shabbos morning, Yom Tov morning, and Megait Vayter, and you go further. But what I want to ask you is, for how many years approximately, or if you know exactly, did Reb Shneur Zalman, the founder of the Chabad movement, for how many years did he teach and say Chassidus known as Maimorim? Please.
Okay, so practically since he had students, he used to give Maimorim. But the earliest Maimorim that we have is obviously the Tanya, which he actually wrote. The first, I would say, 39 chapters of the Tanya, more specifically, chapters 1 to 29, chapter 31, and chapters 33 to 41, altogether 39 chapters, were released by the Baal Tanya, together with the early version of Shayichut Ve'emunah and the Chinuch Katan, which there's proof that the Shayichut Ve'emunah and the Chinuch Katan and Shayichut Ve'emunah were written prior to that part of the Tanya, and an early version of the Igeres HaTshuva were released in Tov Kuf Nun Beis.
What's the English date?
The English date would be 1792.
Thank you.
At Elul, right before Rosh Hashanah, where most of the Tanya was called Tanya Gadol, the big Tanya, and the early version of the Igeres HaTshuva was called Tanya Katan.
And it came out in a book form at the time, or in kuntreisim and pamphlets?
Well, it was basically a book form, meaning written in pamphlets, but as a running book, so to speak.
Okay, so that's about the Tanya. Now let's talk about the Maimorim, the discourses.
So the discourses that we have dated, in other words, the earliest date we have appeared in a manuscript, is from Tzom Gedalia Tov Kuf Nun Gimel, right after he had released this Tanya. It happens to be the day of the passing of Rebbetzin Dvar the Alter Rebbe's daughter, and it could very much be that particular discourse was said as a Gesegen in sich, as a farewell to her. But in any case, it's the only one that we know that the date is written that it's Tzom Gedalia. And from then on till Tov Kuf Ayin Beis, that's for 20 complete years, we have more or less discourses. Now, from that year, we only have the discourses of, let's say, 3 months. Now, we know that the Alter Rebbe continued writing the Tanya And there's in Ayom Yom, it's from the regime of the Frierdiker Rebbe that the Alter Rebbe made the siyum on the Tanya. He completed the first part of the Tanya on Yud Kislev Tavkuf Nun Dalet. So apparently the other chapters, even if he wrote them technically up to Tavkuf Nun Hey, Tavkuf Nun Vav, but he had finished saying them, reciting them by Tavkuf Nun Dalet Yud Kislev, and he had started on Erev Rosh Hashanah Tavkuf Nun. At least that first part of the Tanya, he started then. That was at the birthday of the Tzemach Tzedek.
Okay,
and
so what
the English date, it'll be
1794, 94.
No, 1789.
89. Tell me if I want to summarize, if I understand you correctly.
Yes.
In other words, the Alter Rebbe said what we would call today a mimer. The Tanya was a mimer.
Yes, Maimarim.
Maimarim. They weren't called Maimarim.
The first three chapters, it said that he said them on that first day,
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah.
Yeah.
But apparently, it would seem that the rest were a parak per Shabbos. It was mostly Shabbos.
So here's a question that I've always had.
Go ahead.
The Alter Rebbe was appointed by Reb Mendel of Vitebsk as the leader in the Reisen, I believe, White Russia, whatever, Belarus today, in 1777, when Reb Mendel left together with Rabbi Kaliskit, they made Aliyah to Eretz Yisrael. What did he teach from 1777 to 1789?
So we only have, we don't have any manuscripts that says, okay, this is what he wrote. We have certain letters from him. But other than the letters that he wrote that are printed in Igros Kodesh,
right,
we have certain mamorim that were verbally that the Frierdiker Rebbe said he heard from this chassid, who heard from this chassid, all the way back to the original chassid, who heard from the Alter Rebbe. We have a few such mamorim, but most of it we don't have.
So my question is, but do you believe he said Maimarim?
Oh, of course, there's no question about it.
No question about it.
He taught Chassidus.
He taught Chassidus.
So the question is, did anybody write it down? Not necessarily so.
Why?
Because in those days, most Chassidim would commit it to memory. They lived with it. The famous story with the Volper, who was Reb Chaim Volper, who was a Rav in Volpa, an Av Bezdin in Volpa, and he was one of the Talmidim of the Magid. And later years, he's coming one time to, I guess, Liozna, and Baruch Mordechai is looking through his stuff. He says, well, what are you looking for? He says,
Baruch Mordechai
who later became Rav in Vilna and then in Babroisk.
Ettinger, Baruch
Mordechai Ettinger, he was Rav first in Vilna. He took over from his father-in-law, Reb Shmuel.
Yes.
And he was Rav there for 20 plus years. And then in around about 1820, he became Rav in Babroisk.
Okay, so go ahead, finish the story.
So this Baruch Mordechai, he's going through his stuff and he's looking for, I said, well, what are you looking for? He says, maybe you have writings that you wrote down the teachings of the Magid. So he said, no, when we learned by the Magid, it became one with us. It was one entity with our ethos. We didn't write it down on paper. You have all the Chassidus you write down on paper.
So he starts with the Tanyas, and then he wrote the Tanya. Did he have any, what we called later, chayzrim, who started to write down his Maimarim?
Okay, so the first record, the first bichel, the bichel that contains the earliest...
A bichel means a book.
A bichel, yeah, means
manuscript.
A manuscript that has contains the earliest dates. The bichel is now in the Rebbe's library. It's number 750. This is a bichel that belonged to the famous chassid of the Mittler Rebbe by the name Rebbe Ephraim Smilyaner. He was living in Smilyan. He's described at great length in the
Sichos. Okay, go ahead.
Of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So this is a bichel that belonged to him.
Yes.
And I don't know if he wrote it down when he was a chassid or somebody else, but he had those pages. That's pages that belong to him.
And what is he recording? Which year?
And this is the year Tavkuf Nun Gimel, which would be, since it's the winter of
1793.
1792.
1992. So, okay. Now you mentioned to me earlier today, and that's why I thought of interviewing.
And what's interesting is over here, in this version of those Mamorim, he references the Tanya. He'll say Kenal, as mentioned above, in Tanya Cotton or Tanya Godel. And it was written it seems to be written continuation to the Tanya, which is written in that book.
Oh, that's very interesting. So you mentioned that the Alter Rebbe has said Maimorim every 2 weeks. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
We know that there was a difference between the way the Alter Rebbe recited the Maimorim before his arrest in Peterburg and afterwards. Before his arrest,
1798.
Initially he used to say Maimorim strictly on Shabbos Mevarchim. Shabbos Mevarchim, Shabbos Shuva, Simchas Torah. He had Chanukah, Purim. Those were the times.
But not every Shabbos.
Not every Shabbos.
Okay.
Shabbos Nachmu, those were the Shabbosim that he would say. Shavuos, those were when he would say. As I mentioned, from Tavkuf Nun Dalid, which would be
1794. Okay.
1794, we have 4 Maimorim in manuscripts, some from Shavuos, but in Tavkuf Nun Hey, starting from Shabbos Mevarchim Sivan, we have from every Shabbos Mevarchim up to Shmini Atzeres Tavkuf Nun Ches. We have constantly, and we find
every 2 weeks.
No, not every 2 weeks.
Oh, every Shabbos Mevarchim.
Every Shabbos Mevarchim.
Okay, once a month.
Once a month, and this, the Tzemach Tzedek writes that the brother of the Alter Rebbe, the Maharil, was hired by Rabbi Yehuda Leib, who later became a Rav in Yanovich, and apparently at this time he still lived in Liozna together with the Alter Rebbe. He was actually paid by the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe would pay him a certain sum for him to write down the Maimorim.
To be a copyist.
To be not just a copyist. He wrote it down. He was the chayzer. He was the one who would, repeat it and write it down. His was the official copy of the Maimon.
Okay, so why are you mentioning this?
I'm mentioning this because what happens exactly at that time, it seems one of the a few versions of Takonos of Liozna, and one of them seems to be from Sivan Tavkuf Nun Hey, from that month.
Yeah.
So apparently when that Takana was made, exactly when they should travel, when they should. Also something else that started then, we all know there's something called Maimid. Maimid is where they fundraise for the Beis Harav.
For the Rebbe's household, for their basic needs.
So for basic needs.
Financial support.
The Maimid, as we know it, which is for basic needs of the Rabbeim and even for buying books, that we know the first letter that we have from either the Mittler Rebbe or his colleague, the Rabbi Strascheller, who later became Rabbi Strashel, is from Tavkuf Samachei from 1805. However, a earlier version of fundraising that the Alter Rebbe wanted every chassid to contribute to, in addition to the contribution that they used to make for the people in Israel, the families in Israel, was for Garkich. Garkich means people came to Liozna, to the Alter Rebbe, as they grew, and the locals in Liozna couldn't. They would support them for Shabbos,
right?
But for during the week, they also needed somewhere to eat. So the Alter Rebbe made a special collection in which he wanted each chassid to contribute, and we know who the fundraiser was. It was the famous chassid of Shmuel Munkes.
Huh. So what is Garkich? Kich for the kitchen?
Means a kitchen, and Garkich probably means it's a mini kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah. And the famous letter printed at the end of Kuntras Achrin, Utzdaka Kanachal Eison,
yes,
was sent with him Shabbos Mevorchim Elul Tavkuf Nun Ches, but it's not the first. There's an earlier letter, I believe.
It was sent with who? Shmuel Munkes?
Shmuel Munkes.
To who? To the chassidim?
To the chassidim. And he's mentioned over there. That's how we know that it was sent with him. In the manuscripts, it's written.
Really? His name is written?
Shmuel Munkes. In the manuscript, not in the letter itself. The Alter Rebbe usually used to refer to the guy who's carrying the letter as Moiser Ksav Zeh, the guy who's going to transmit this writing. But we have an earlier letter that's from him from that time. So by that time, there was already established. We also have
your point you're making is that the concept of Maimid
the earlier version of Maimid. Later, it was probably specifically for the household of the Rebbe. Well, we know the Alter Rebbe's.
So what was the earlier version for what?
A collection that every chassid gave.
For what purpose?
The purpose was to support all the people traveling to Liozna. The people traveling to Liozna, they need somewhere to stay.
I understand. Later it became for the Rebbe's household.
So there were wealthy people who paid their own individual thing, but for those who didn't
I have a question. Would you say that the Alter Rebbe is the one who created the idea of Maimid, or do you know if there's historical evidence that it already existed before?
In other Hasidic circles, it could have existed before. And we have from Reb Shlomo Karlin, we have a letter where he tells people what to give and how much to give.
Before.
But the Alter Rebbe specifically says, we know we have when the Alter Rebbe was arrested and they asked him, and the Alter Rebbe specifically said that he doesn't accept funds from the Chassidim. So the funds that were raised from the Chassidim, at least those 10 years that we're talking about, the Garkich was not raised for the benefit of the Alter Rebbe.
It was bad for the people coming to Lozhner.
Who are coming to Lozhner.
Well, Lozhner and
Liadi. And eventually in Lubavitch, and in the times of the Tzemach Tzedek, we knew that the Tzemach Tzedek was wealthy, or the Chassidim would give him money for this purpose.
Yes.
And he would distribute a certain amount of money for the Orchim that would come, so they should have.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, but go back now to every 2 weeks.
What happened was after Peterburg, now the last 2 years, I would say, well, from Tovkuf, it's not so clear exactly what years, but according to my research, it seems that definitely after the first, maybe even the year right preceding the arrest of the Alter Rebbe,
1797,
1798. In 1798, the Alter Rebbe started saying, at least for his sons, he would say almost every other Shabbos, but definitely by the time that the Alter Rebbe was released from the prison the second time, in other words, that was 1801. And in 1801,
it was 1800. It was Hanukkah.
In 1800, he was released. He was arrested. He was arrested on Dalet Kislev. Second time around, the Mishnah Yoel brings a document, the Rebbe refers to a document published in Mishnah Yoel, that he was arrested on Dalet Kislev, which is in the winter of 1800, and in the fall of 1800, and he was 3 weeks later, Chav Gimel Kislev, he was released to house arrest from wherever place they were holding him.
Right.
However, he was not allowed to leave Peterburg. So there were a whole bunch of Chassidim that came to Peterburg, including the Tzemach Tzedek and the Mittler Rebbe. The Mittler Rebbe even recorded some Mamorim. And it seems that there is a certain Mamorim that Alter Rebbe said on an engagement, a Tnoim, that they actually made in Peterburg. In Peterburg.
Right.
Not in Tfisa. He was released in
house arrest. But when did these 2 weeks, my Mamorim every 2 weeks began?
So what happens was, you'll see already towards the end of that summer of 1801, he's already saying every other Shabbos, or actually every Shabbos, he's saying a mimer. But these are individual Mamorim. He's not saying it Barabim. He's just saying it individually. Well, we know there's a famous mimer, Smoilei Tachas L'Roishi, printed in Torah Erkesisa, which was said in Parshas Chukas Dubrovna. And a lot of these Mamorim we have in the Mittler Rebbe's writings, we have his explanations on it.
Right.
So, but we have also the Maril Sanocha from the way the Maril wrote it down.
Okay, so what's the point of this mimer?
The point I'm making is that once he came, there's a bichul that begins from the Mittler Rebbe's Hanochas from Tovkuf Samach Beis, which is from the fall of 1801 up to, and over there you can see that every 2 weeks there's a mimer. On an average of every 2 weeks there's a Torah which he said Berabim, which he said for the public.
Right, now you told me something there about Rabbi Moshe, his son, would write down Torah Berabim.
Okay, now what happened is, so we have from the Mittler Rebbe, the earliest bichul that we have, that we know for certain from the Mittler Rebbe, is a bichul that's called 1161 in the Rebbe's library, and that bichul seems to be Mamorim from Tavkuf Nun Ches, little Tavkuf Nun Zayin, basically from 1897 onwards till 1899.
1799.
Excuse me, from 1797 to 1799.
Yeah.
And then we have another bichul called 1003, which is kind of a continuation. It's from 1799 to 1801. Then we have from when the Alter Rebbe, from the first Shabbos Shuvah, that the Alter Rebbe usually did not say Mamorim on Rosh Hashanah. There were certain exceptions, but on a usual case, he did not say on Rosh Hashanah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because Rosh Hashanah was like a time, him and the Eibishter was not time for the public. There was very
removed, isolated.
There was very isolated cases in which he did say on Rosh Hashanah. But Shabbos Shuvah he would say.
Yes.
So we have from Shabbos Shuvah Tavkuf Samach Beis. The first bichul was he wrote till Chanukah Samach Gimel, before Chanukah Samach Gimel, and almost till Yutas Kislev Samach Gimel. So in any case, we have that bichel of the Rebbe, of the Mitler Rebbe. So we have a lot of bichlach from the Mitler Rebbe. The first bichel that we have from Reb Moshe starts in middle of Tavkuf Samach Beis, which would be 1802.
Right, and you told me today that the last bichel that we have is
towards the end of 1802, I guess, in Parshas Nitzavim. From then onwards, Reb Moshe would write on every Torah that was said Berabim, he would write in the caption Torah Berabim, in a parenthesis.
Right. Yeah. We're here with Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Keller. We've had a wonderful discussion about the Alter Rebbe's Maimorim and his conduct with saying Chassidus. We will continue in our second segment very soon. Thank you.